Well, Karl, we're here on a glorious morning at Spigot Lodge, and it feels like summer's well and truly arrived with Royal Ascot just around the corner. You must be heading to that meeting full of optimism after a good start to the season, with group winners both at home and abroad.
Yeah, we've managed to get 5 group winners in total, I think. Unlucky probably not to have another 1 or 2 on top of that, but yeah, the horses have been generally in good form, but as most trainers will tell you, when people are saying how well you're doing, you always know the ones that should be winning that haven't been winning, so we've had plenty of them as well.
Yeah, and the 2-year-olds have certainly made a big contribution to your success in the first part of the season. I don't think any trainer in Britain or Ireland has had more 2-year-old winners than you this year. They're obviously a good bunch, but at the start of the season, did you think they're as strong a bunch as you've ever had?
Yeah, all the way through, you know, from the time you're breaking them in the autumn, you're sort of looking at them as a whole, you're not really pushing any buttons as such, but I thought on looks they were as good and strong a bunch as we've had, and the pedigrees definitely were the strongest bunch of pedigrees we've had, so I was very hopeful all through the winter, and it's turned out that way.
Yeah, and it seems fitting to kick off with the 2-year-olds as we look at your Royal Ascot team, and starting with Elite Status, who's looked a bit of a monster in winning both his starts to date. Is it all systems go for the Norfolk with him?
Fingers crossed, yeah, he's working really well, came out of the National Stakes really well, and he's a lovely horse, and you know, sky's the limit for him, to be honest.
Yeah, and it looked a deep renewal of the National Stakes. Were you surprised by the manner in which you won it? I think it was by 5 lengths, wasn't it?
Going into it, I thought it was the strongest race on paper, 2-year-old race on paper so far this season. I mean, I went down there not overconfident, but I was confident he was going to be the one they had to beat. But if it was the manner that he did it that probably took us a little bit by surprise. He did it very, very well.
Yeah, and you said after the race that Elite Status could be a better racehorse than his sire, Havana Grey, who you also trained and was a Group 1 winner for the yard. So I guess that just underlines the regard you hold this horse in.
Yeah, Havana was a great racehorse, a tough horse, a great constitution, but this fella has all those assets and a bit more. You know, he's a scopier type of animal than Havana Grey, and yeah, I'd be pretty confident that he'd be better than him on the track.
Yeah. And in the Queen Mary, you look set to run Beautiful Diamond. She looked a useful prospect when making her winning debut at Nottingham. You must have been delighted with that performance.
Yeah, she went there with. She came to us we only had her sort of 6-8 weeks. Came from the breeze ups at Goffs for the big reputation. You know, she did a very quick time. Cost a lot of money, obviously. Like a lot of breeze up horses, we sort of had to rein her in a little bit when she arrived. So we hadn't done asked any big questions of her going into that first run, and you know, while I was very hopeful she'd run a nice race, again she sort of performed above what we could have expected from what we'd seen at home. So very, very happy with her, and she's come out of the race nicely, and she's on target for the Queen Mary. Yeah,
and you won the race last year with Dramatised, so you know what it takes to win it. Do you think this filly could reach that level?
I think she's got the potential to, yeah. She's a different type of filly, as I say. We had Dramatised all winter, or most of the winter, so we knew her really well, and she was always quite an exuberant filly. Again, we had to sort of keep the lid on her, really. Remember Danny Tudor, who rode her, used to come and ride her at home, said it was like sitting on a stick of dynamite. You know, she was that type of filly, whereas this filly is similar traits, but you know, because we haven't had her that long, and she'd had a sort of prep for the breeze up, we were sort of pretty easy with her going into Nottingham. And she's obviously quite clean-winded filly, so we won't be overdoing her going into the Queen Mary either, which is only 2 weeks from her debut.
Yeah, and speaking of Dramatised, she proved better than ever when beating her elders in the Temple Stakes at Haydock last time. Are you looking forward to running her in the King's Stand at Royal Ascot?
Yeah, very much so. She's worked this morning, and Danny Tudop's come in and ridden her this morning. He's delighted with her. He rode her work before the Temple Stakes, although he couldn't do the weight with her at Haydock, on her at Haydock. So this is the first time he sat on her since the Temple, and he's very happy with her. She's come on again, she's sharpened again, and she did that last year, although she went to Newmarket as a 2-year-old, and we knew we had a very good horse on her hands. She took a step forward from that Newmarket run into the Queen Mary last year, and I think she's going to do the same from the Temple Stakes to the King's Stand. Whether she's good enough now, that's another question, because it's a very hot race, but I'm sure she'll put up a good show.
Yeah, and also on the first day of the meeting, the St James's Palace Stakes, you look set to run Indestructible. He was down the field in the 2,000 guineas last time, but he won't be out of place there judged on his Craven form, will he?
Not at all, no. From Craven to Guineas was only 2 weeks this year, and it was too quick for a horse like him. You know, I think he's a horse that likes to run fresh. And to be fair to Kia, rang me up after the Guineas and said, look, forget about Irish Guineas, let's try and prepare him for Royal Ascot and have him bouncing going in there. He's training really well, he looks great form, so very happy with him. Again, it's a tough race, as they all are at Royal Ascot, but I'm sure he'll put up an improved performance. Certainly he'll leave the form of the Guineas behind, but again, whether he's good enough to win a Group 1 like the St James Palace, but I think he'll perform well.
Yeah, and you've got a couple of possible runners in the Commonwealth Cup with Cold Case and Swingalong. Is the plan to run both of them there?
Cold Case would be ground dependent. I have to speak to his owner, Sheikh Mohammed Abeid. I'd be a little bit nervous running him on real fast ground again. You know, he is much better with a bit of cut in the ground. Swingalong definitely goes. She'll love quick ground, and the drop back to 6 won't inconvenience her. And she's going a little bit under the radar. You know, she's a big price, and I think people have forgotten about her, but she's still a very good filly.
Yeah, and you could also be double-handed in the Jersey with Flight Plan and Holloway Boy. Like Indestructible, both horses were down the field in the 2,000 guineas, but you think there were excuses for those runs?
Oh, without a doubt. Certainly on ground was certainly the problem for Flight Plan. He was like Bambi on ice, you know, in the last furlong or two, if you go back and watch it. Hated that soft ground. He's a real good actioned horse. He's working very well. He'll love the track. Don't think this drop back to a stiff 7 will inconvenience him, and you know, we're very happy with his work. Holloway Boy, I probably blame myself a little bit. He wouldn't mind cutting the ground. Oh, he certainly handles it, as he showed in the Racing Post Trophy last year. But I left the visor on. Didn't take heed. Danny didn't think he wanted the visor on after riding him in the Racing Post, but I didn't take that advice and put it on again. And Christoph got off him after the Guineas and said exactly the same. He almost travelled like he was probably the last horse off the bridle in the Guineas, and I thought he'd guaranteed to pick up and run home, but he just didn't stay the trip after running too keen. So he'll go there in good form. He won't have the visor on, and hopefully he can produce what he did last year at Royal Ascot.
Yeah, you know, track and trip suit him well. And Lethal Levi, he looks a leading contender for the Wokingham on the Saturday of the meeting, having run a cracker win second at York last time. Yeah,
he was very much a progressive horse last year, and a real tough horse. And the race that really sealed it for me that he was going to be a very, very good sprinter this year, and he could still step up into patent company, was his last run when he, as a 3-year-old, took on the older horses and some real hardened horses like Summergand in a handicap at York. Performed really well, but came back with an injury, and he carried that injury in the race, I think, because he was just lugging, which he'd never done before. He was just hanging one way. So he had plenty of time off. He's over that little injury, and he ran really well at York last time. I think he could be really competitive off 100 in the Wokingham.
Yeah, and of the other handicaps at the meeting, I know Liberty Lane's a horse you're looking forward to running in the Golden Gates handicap.
Yeah, he's a lovely horse, one of my favourite horses, to be honest, if I'm truthful. You know, he ran a good race in the Dante. Wasn't the plan to make the run in. He's definitely a better horse, just sat in, but just jumped a bit keen and ran a bit keen with Clifford. So if he doesn't do that, I think he can be very competitive off 100.
Yeah, and lastly, Karl, if I could just put you on the spot, if I had to ask you for your best chance of a winner at this year's Royal Meeting, who would you go for?
I suppose I'll be very disappointed if we get beat with elite status. That said, we could be bumping into a couple of hot Americans, but they always come over with big reputations, and hopefully we can lower their flag again.
Well, thanks very much for your time, Karl, and wishing you the best of luck both at Royal Ascot and for the rest of the season.
Thanks very much.
Get more than just opinion this Ascot. Download the free Sporting Life app today for insight, detailed opinion and analysis, race cards and results too, all at the tap of a finger. Access tips and best bets from our expert team of tipsters, time form analysis on the big races, and the latest insight from our star columnists each day of the Royal Meeting. There's tons to get stuck into, so download the free Sporting Life app today. Users must be 18 or over.